I would like to greet you all with a johar, as they say in Bastar. And now increasingly, the young population there has formed a movement called the Mulwasi Bachao Manch. A very powerful non-violent movement is right now happening in at least 29 different locations in Bastar. And they are now, they greet each other with a Bhumkal Johar. Now, Bhumkal is a rebellion that had happened in Bastar in 1910 when there was somebody called Gunda Dhoor who had fought against the Britishers. And there are many such heroes across the tribal belt in India, and their valiant struggles remind us how the salient questions that the Adivasis of the country face across different states in India about the protection of the resources, about life and liberty. I mean, they remain the same. The threat remains the same, as in colonial times. When we reflect about the question of democracy in India, in Adivasi areas like Bastar, we think about rights, we think about justice. Now, there is, of course, rights and there's justice, and in between, in the gap that exists, you have important institutions that need to work. The administration, the policy, the police, and the judiciary are the most important of them. And all of them taken together have the responsibility for the implementation of laws and state policy. It goes without saying that our expectations as citizens is that these laws and policies should respect the constitutional mandate and should be implemented legally. But what if the law and policy is itself illegal? For example, UAPA, the mining policy, and the structures of democracy, the administration, the police, and the judiciary are used and manipulated towards political ends that is contrary to the vision as outlined in the Constitution. This is what is happening in Bastar today. The 7 districts that are in the subdivision called Bastar, which, as you know, is in the southernmost part of Chhattisgarh. Bastar is Adivasi land and constitutionally protected under the 5th schedule. But the ground reality is that it enjoys no such protection and is a victim of the Indian state's predatory economic policies. This has been made possible because of the Office of the Governor and bodies like the Tribal Advisory Council. They exist, but they don't really exist. In the sense, they just remain cosmetic bodies. Members of the Legislative Assembly and Parliament are all Adivasis, but become implementers of state policy as upheld by the political party they may belong to. And in Chhattisgarh, we basically have 2 main political parties, that is the BJP and the Congress. And likewise, you find social organizations in society, like the Sarva Adivasi Samaj, which is a social organization of the very many different Adivasi groups of Bastar taken together. But the Sarva Adivasi Samaj also has become factionalized, again on party lines. The CPI used to be a strong force in Bastar in the first few decades after 1947, but is no longer so. And the CPI Maoist is there and has its presence in many districts, especially in the Bastar region. But because it is banned, it is restricted to underground politics in the shape of ambushes, ID blasts, and so on. So politics that rely on arms, on ammunition. And the intense warfare continues between the Indian state and the Maoists since 2005. So this is the context in which we need to examine the experience of Adivasis who are at the receiving end of injustice caused due to the ruinous policies of the BJP and Congress. who get killed in fake encounters or find themselves in jail and then are at the mercy of the judicial system at the district level, since few can access the High Court, because the High Court in Chhattisgarh is pretty far. I mean, it's in Bilaspur. It's an overnight journey and costs a lot of money, so people are not in a position to access the High Court, and less so the Supreme Court. So it's really the district courts that, that they rely on for justice. Now, when you examine the story of law, police, courts, and justice, we find that in the mind of a lay person, judiciary and justice still go together. But this applies less to the police in Bastar, and I think this may also be the case in other parts of the country. Bastar today is the most militarized zone in the country. I think a couple of years ago it was being said that we had more paramilitary than even Kashmir. So we are either very similar to Kashmir or we are close to Kashmir. But it is very strange, odd, and it's quite terrible that despite being perhaps the most militarized zone in the country, the people of Bastar do not have a civil police. And why is it so? Because the police and the security forces are working together. And we have all kinds of paramilitary now in Bastar. We had the IRBs during the time of the Salvajudum, but now we have, CRPF, of course, in very large numbers, but part of CRPs are the commando force. We have the STF, we have border security force, we have the ITDP, so like that, and then we have state police working together with the paramilitary. Now in state police, we have the regular police, that is the civil police, as well as special police, like we have recently something called the Bastar Fighters. We have the Koya Commandos. I mean, you must have heard about the SPOs, the Special Police Officers, who were banned by the Supreme Court in 2011, when the Salvajudum was also banned. But then immediately after the ban, the SPOs were, just the name was changed. From SPOs, it became the Chhattisgarh Auxiliary Force. Almost the entire, I think that time there were around 6,000 SPOs. And all of them were just, the name changed and they all became the CAF, the Chhattisgarh Auxiliary Force. And then after that, because see, why were the SPOs banned? What was the principle behind it? The principle behind it was that you cannot employ Adivasi youth for, and especially those who are underage, in counterinsurgency. But despite the principle being underlined by the Supreme Court, what did we find? That, the same, except maybe I think they ousted a few of them who were underage, but most of them were kept as CAF. And after that, we have had a series of local forces, like we have had the Koya Commandos. The CRPF now has a special Adivasi battalion called the Bastar Battalion. And again, it did that in the name of employment, that we are giving employment to the people of Bastar. So we have now Adivasis in as CRPF also. And then we have very recently a force called actually not that recently, it's around 5 years old, something called the District Reserve Guards, the DRGs. Now the DRGs are again local Adivasis, and a good percentage of them are actually surrendered militants who surrendered and they were re-employed in the police force. So therefore, what we find is this very close collaboration between the central and the, central and the state police. To the extent that if you physically, find these thanas or the police stations located inside the CRPF camps. So even to just locate, something has happened, a fake encounter has happened, and the wife or the family member of the person who was killed wants to go to the police thana to just write a complaint. But then even to access that becomes difficult. As happened very recently, this was the most recent fake encounter, in fact, which happened in the intervening night of 7th and 8th February in a place called Gundam in Bijapur, where a person called Lakma Punem, who is not a Maoist, he is a family man, a farmer. He has 8 children. I mean, the youngest child is still, suckling. And he had gone to the bazaar. It was a bazaar day that day. He had gone to the bazaar. He came back home, tired, had a few drinks, and then slept. And if you have seen the Adivasi homes, you will see that they are just a courtyard. Often they have no walls, and they may have this charpai, or they may be just sleeping on the ground. So literally no physical protection as such. And then what happens is that in the middle of the night, there's firing from one side of the village. So Lakma Punem, he ran towards his fields. Now there are no hills there are no jungles in that particular location. And he ran not because he's a Maoist, but because very typically the police pick up people like that. I mean, they go to houses and they find men, especially youth, they get picked up like that, and there are false charges on them and so on. So Lakma Punem also ran. There's somebody called Badru also ran. And what they found was that there was another contingent of the forces was there, and they saw them running, and that was enough. What they call in Hindi sandigd meaning suspicious, and they opened fire, killing Lakma Punem on the ground. Now the person who found Lakma Punem was his wife's sister, who had, because after that they went looking for Lakma Punem's body after the forces had gone, and they found that the person who found, as I said, was his sister-in-law, who herself had become a widow during the Silgate protests. In May 2001, there was a protest in a village called Silger against the new security force camp that had come overnight. And people were just protesting against that. And then the police opened fire and killed 3 of them, besides one woman who was pregnant, so she also died a few months later. So this is just, in this one story, you can see how things, like you go to one, you're just covering one incident, and you're seeing 2 women in one house who are now both widows because of the in-court war that is going on in Bastar. As far as, I'll come to the courts, but I'm just covering the police aspect of it, because police and courts are all, they are related. And what you find in Bastar is that complaining, as I said, just lodging complaints is really it's a big task, because they just do not even allow us to register a complaint. And as you know, it's this shikayat is just a complaint. It's after some preliminary investigation that the police is supposed to then, according to criminal procedure, lodge an FIR. But what happens is that it never reaches the FIR stage. After every incident, the police has already filed an FIR where they have their own concocted story. So whatever is the people's version then becomes it should be admitted as a counter FIR, but then it never is. And as a result, it just remains at best a shikayat, meaning a complaint, which goes in the file and which they should actually investigate into when the SDM and others are doing their investigation into the case, but which rarely happens. So as a result, the difference, of course, is that during the Salva Judum times, you must have heard about Salva Judum and the counter-insurgency operations in 2005 onwards, and Operation Green Hunt and so on. So during that time, nobody went to the thanas at all to write, because they saw the police and the paramilitary working together, so there was no question of going there. But now, of course, people are going. They are surrounding these police stations. They are doing rallies. They are doing dharnas, but with little effect. And there are scores of examples of this kind. There are many examples which come to my mind right now. People who were killed while they were fishing, like Nipo Bhima of Rewali village in Dantewada, of Masa of Tolevarti village in Sukma, who was killed when he was just collecting the green mangoes that had fallen under his mango tree in Tolevarti village of Sukma. Paike, a woman of Neeram village in Bijapur, across the Indravati river, who was sleeping with her mother at home when the DRG came inside the house and picked her up, and then she was raped on their way, and then she was killed. And all this because Paike, at some stage, when the Maoists came, was made to cook their meal, and so on. Because often that kind of help is asked and is given by people. So, but the thing is that today, the DRG, which has, as I said, surrendered militants, so something like that from a few years ago, that somebody participated in a meeting, somebody cooked a meal, or whatever, can be used, and that person can be implicated, either arrested or, as in Paike's case, killed. And then others who are actually part of the Maoist movement, whether as a militia member, like Santosh Markam of a village in Nilavaya in Dantewada, or Darshan Pedda of Kanke district, who was actually a militant. I mean, all of them just picked and killed, you see. So this kind of a thing is happening, continues to happen in Bastar. And believe me, I'm not exaggerating, that almost no day goes when we do not hear of people being picked up. I mean, killings, of course, happen maybe every 1-2 weeks or something, we hear of something, but these are not, a person dying is in a normal place, it's a one-off kind of a thing, na? Hatya, killing. But in Bastar, it is really very, very, very common now. What we have witnessed in Bastar since 2005 is the most violent phase of Bastar's history. And I cannot, underline it enough. I mean, it is so terrible what is going on there. And we have seen large-scale massacres there. So besides these individual persons who are being picked up, who are killed, and incarcerated. I mean, so in jails, for example, we have a very large number of under trial prisoners. But even those killed, as I was saying, whether they be individuals or whether they be, there are many such villages which saw people killed in large numbers. So like in Sarkeguda of Bijapur in 2012, you saw 17 people killed when they were participating in a seed festival in the night. And many of them were minors. In Edesmeta in 2013, also in Bijapur district, there were 8 killed. Also, they were in a seed festival, participating in a seed festival in the night. And 4 of them were minors. And in these 2 cases, at least, there was a judicial inquiry set up. And the Inquiry Commission of Justice V.N. Agarwal found the police guilty, the security forces guilty, and very categorically said that these were ordinary villagers. But the state, what we found was that Congress, when it was in the opposition, was raising, Sarkeguda issue and Edesmeta issue. But after it came to power, and after the reports actually were, came out in favor of the people, they didn't even table it in the assembly, leave alone take any action on that. And taking action in any case is very difficult, because if it's a contingent of police, that way you can't name or see a single police officer. So, as far as the command responsibility is concerned, it is very difficult to establish in all these cases. And therefore, justice just remains, incomplete. So even though truth was established in the Edesmeta and the Sarkeguda case, but nothing has come of it. Likewise, you must have heard about the Gompad case, in which in 2009, when 19 or so were killed in subsequent instances. And you heard about how after so many years, when finally the Supreme Court gave its order and verdict or whatever, and it held activist Himanshu Kumar responsible for bringing in, for filing a fake case, and in fact said that he would be fined. So it's like this. I mean, Gompad, there are, Singaram had 19 people killed, like that. So in the sense, it's whatever has been happening there is really, see, genocide, I mean, the way genocide is understood in wars, I mean, perhaps it may not exactly fit in that definition, but it's just too many people who have been killed in Bastar since 2005. The theater of the practice of law, I'm now coming to the courts and thinking about how is law in practice. So theater of the practice of law are, of course, the courts. Now, how do the courts function in Bastar? Most cases in Bastar today are what are known as Naxal cases. Most of these cases are also false cases. As mentioned earlier, people get caught while in the jungle, when they are collecting minor forest produce, while they're going to the bazaar, while they're going to the hospital, while they are going to collect the rations from the public distribution system shop, while they're doing coolie work across the border in Telangana. People regularly go every January, February from these villages to do coolie work in Cherla and other places across the border. And all this kind of picking up is simply on suspicion. And after every Maoist ambush or ID blast or instances like burning of vehicles or encounters, especially where policemen get killed, what happens is that the police then literally invade all the surrounding villages and then they pick up people. So the most dramatic example is the picking up of 121 Adivasis from more than 10 villages after there was an ambush in a place called Burkapal in Sukma district, in which 26 Jawans died. So after that, they caught hold of this 121, and this was an incident that happened in 2017, and they were finally released in 2022, 2022, when they were found to be they were all acquitted for want of evidence. But a case, and they were all under UAPA. Besides other sections of the IPC, which are called Naxal Dhara, Naxal sections they are called locally. So these will be rioting sections or murder sections. Then likewise sections of the Explosive Act, sections of the Arms Act. There's also the Chhattisgarh Special Public Security Act, so that also gets invoked. UAPA gets invoked. So what happened? And I should mention that Bastar is perhaps the one place with the largest instance of UAPA. Even the Chhattisgarh government doesn't admit it. But if just by seeing the number of cases in the courts, the NIA designated courts, there were at least 300 or so quick cases, 400 cases, even a couple of years ago. And Burkapal was an exception, of course, with 121 in one case. But still, in every case, you will find at least 2, 4, 10, 15. So that kind of numbers are there. And therefore, if you look at UAPA, actual number of Adivasis under UAPA, not just the cases that they are booked under, then you'll actually find a very large number of people under UAPA. And as you know, UAPA is draconian, and bail under UAPA is next to impossible, because there's an unwritten law almost that bail is not given in UAPA. And the acquittal, because they do get acquitted at the end of the day, because less than 1%, in less than 1% of the cases, there are convictions, because as I said, most of these are false cases. And but the whole process of trial is very, very slow, and it is slow because we are depending on witnesses who are police witnesses, mostly police witnesses. And even if there are persons from the village, these are people whom the police has set up, so they take a long time in coming into court. Sometimes the policemen, when the incident happened, maybe in one thana or one force, but may have since been transferred to different locations, not only within Bastar but outside Bastar. So therefore, it takes sometimes a very long time for these witnesses to actually come to court. Then you also see, in many cases, instances where the complainant, because the complainant is inevitably a policeman, inspector or somebody, and so the complainant and the investigating officer in many instances are the same. And there are cases where we have this very odd kind of a situation where, you know, all the witnesses have been examined, but we are just waiting for one investigating officer for a very long time, and despite according to criminal procedure, the summons and then the 500 rupee fine and then the arrest warrant, etc. But these are not complied with, and like I have one case where we are in its fourth year, and we are just waiting for the investigating officer who is now placed in another district in Chhattisgarh to come. So that kind of a situation can be there. And these things can be expedited if the judge is sensitive. But the thing is, the judges don't think much of the right to life or liberty of the ordinary Adivasi. Like, I have rarely gone to the High Court because it is, as I said, the distance and the money involved and so on. But in one case, Lakshmaya's case, I did go to the High Court. Now, in that case, he had already been incarcerated for a whole year, and it was a false charge. He had gone to visit his daughter in school. It was holidays for 3-4 days. They lived 27 kilometers inside, so instead of taking the daughter inside, bringing her back, he was just bringing her some stuff from home and visiting her. So just outside the hostel, he was picked up by plainclothes people. He was taken to the police thana, and then after 2 days, they showed him they caught him in the jungle, and they showed him, they charged him with under sections of the Explosive Substances Act and so on. Now, in Lakshmaya's case, after a whole year, because initially when I tried to apply for bail, I was told that no, just wait, let some witnesses be examined. Then after some witnesses were examined and it was still taking time, I thought I applied for bail again, which was rejected at the local level, and then I went to the High Court in that particular case. And as I said, we were into our second year, and the judge says, but madam, it's only 1.5 years. He's charged under very, serious, it's a very serious offense. He's charged under the Naxalite, case. How can we let him go? It's that is the reframe. In another case, recently, like literally, I'm having to fight with the judge, where in this particular case, there are 8 persons who were incarcerated. One of them died in custody. It's going on since 2018. And now what happened is that all the witnesses were examined except the investigating officer. And then 2 other persons were brought in the same case because the FIR was the same. So now, according to the existing practice in our courts, just for those 2, all the witnesses which are in their charge sheet would need to be examined, and my 7 people have to wait because the investigating officer is the same. So all of those we have. So therefore, I have also been working to get those witnesses. I mean, even though my witnesses are done, but just for those 2, the sooner those witnesses come, I get relief for my people. And even now, like, we are still waiting for the investigating officer and one last witness for those 2. So it's as ridiculous as that. And Lakshmaya, whom I mentioned earlier, Lakshmaya unfortunately was picked up after he got released and everything. I think after 6 months he had gone to Warangal side as a coolie, and he was picked up there. So now Lakshmaya, like many other Adivasis who are in Khammam jail, so Lakshmaya finds himself in Khammam jail now. I mean, this is the kind of a situation that we are up against. increasingly we find, as I said, we have very impressive non-violent movements going on in the country, open and democratic movements going on against the expansion of camps, because camps which began with Salva Judum, I'm talking of the security camps, when they were brought in, it was said that these are temporary camps, but now they are permanent camps, and we have no more camps. So if you go to Jagdalpur, which is a city in Bastar subdivision, you will not find paramilitary there. So it's all very normal. I mean, there's theater, mall, etc., etc. But if you go inside in the conflict zone, you know, every 3 kilometers, 5 kilometers, there are camps. According to the IG office, data got from the IG office recently, there were 54 camps, new camps, in the last 4 years. And even now, as we speak, there are protests going on against new camps that have come up or new camps that are in the offing. Now, why are these camps, why is there the need to have more and more camps? So actually, you know, having the Maoists is a very good, excuse for the government to continue its militarization. Because on the face of it, they say, you know, it's for the Maoists. But actually, on the ground, you see how it is, of course, it may be for the Maoists, but it is also for the mining interests. Because they want, you know, in different parts of Bastar, Bastar, as you may know, is very rich in minerals, especially iron ore, which is the best quality, I think, in Asia or something. And so as a result, you find in different parts of Bastar, you find some mining, 1 or 2 parts at least, where you, like in Bela Bhatia in Dantewada, where the NMDC has been mining now for 70 years. So that was the deposit 14. So then they also tried to get deposit 13 for Adani. And then there was a big protest there, and the government said that no, we have a PESA resolution. People have said yes, but actually it was not so. People said no, this is all false resolution, fake resolution. So there was a big protest and so on. And that is one successful example we have where the mining was put to a stop. But then we have other examples where in Narayanpur district, despite a very popular, very powerful protest in the last 2-3 years, mining has come up there, and mining that is being done by Nico Jaiswal. Similarly, in Raughat area, which has iron ore deposits next only to Bela Bhatia. So Bela Bhatia Kirandul has the largest quantum, and after that, it is Raughat. Now in Raughat, they have been trying to build a railway line where the Bhilai steel plant is involved. And again, takeover of lands without PESA, following the PESA rules or the forest rights regulation. So this is all being done there quite openly, and despite people's protests. And protests, very powerful protests of youth are being, suppressed forcibly. Lathi charge is very common. Their beatings, I feel beatings are usually not seen as torture when you think of torture definition and all that. But in Bastar, we have beatings as torture. There are so many photos I can show you where people send photos of how they were beaten, and blood coming out, all this gray, blue, and it's women beaten. People are beaten. So all this is going on. So what you find is that the excuse is the Maoists, but actually you have all these interests that are being protected by the government. I've just come from a fact-finding in North Bastar. I went to a place called Madonar in Narayanpur district, where there's a very powerful protest going on against a camp. But what the people said was that it is actually a series of camps, because, as I said, the iron ore mine there has come up, despite their protest. So now what the state is doing is that they are encircling that mine with camps like that. It's proposed camps. These are dotted. So people were naming that a camp is going to come up in this village, then this village, then this. And actually, if in the map you see, it's a circle. So what are they doing? They are protecting the mines or mining from the Maoists. So of course it is related to the Maoists ultimately. But in terms of numbers, it is not as though they are concerned that the Maoists should, fall or whatever. But it is their interest is mining, and that should continue. So what also happens is that not allowing the Maoists, but Maoists may at the most, they may stop, they may burn that JCB machines and things like that. But I'm sorry to say it's not as though they have been able to stop the mining from happening, because mining is happening in Bastar. And the whole state apparatus is used towards that. So PESA is bypassed, Forest Rights Regulation Act is bypassed. When you set up camps, and then as I said, the Thana is inside the camp, then non-violent movements, they have no justice either, because nobody is listening to them. Since 2021, we have places in Bastar, like in Silger itself, if you see. They fought for that camp which came overnight, right? As I mentioned, May 21. May 17th, 3 people killed. There was huge anger and indignation, and people really came on the street. And these are youth who saw Salvajidum, who saw their houses being burned. So these are children who were small in 2005, but they are now youth. And they understand things like what's happening. So they are very strong. And these are educated youth also. Many of them have gone to school. So it was a very powerful movement. But what did we see? They protested against the fake PESA resolution. It was a completely democratic protest. They had support from all over the country. The Silger protest is like, if you're a student of the Naxalite movement, as I have been in my PhD, I remember a poet from, I think, Bihar or UP. There's a poem which says, Naxalbari is not just the name of a village. So similarly, in recent times, Silger is not just the name of a village. Now it's Silger all over Bastar. Right now there are 29 locations where these protests are going on. And these are protests where people come with their grain, their firewood, their children, their everything. So when you go to these sites, you'll find their clothes hanging from treetops, clotheslines, some people cooking there. So it's that kind of an atmosphere. These are people who are there. People who have walked 4 or 5 days to come to these protest sites and stay there. So when you count the number of days that people have been there, sometimes you come across, like in Pusnar, Burji, in Bijapur, this time we counted, it was 425 days of protest. In Silger itself, and there, despite the protest, the camp came up. They dismantled the protest site. Sometimes they have even burnt the protest site. And but in Burji, they came back. So in January this year, because if they had not fought that, it would have really been very discouraging for all the young people of Mulwasi Bachao Manch. So therefore, Burji people, they went back and they again have established themselves on the campsite, despite their entire campsite being dismantled, not once but 3 times. And the 4th time they had to, there was severe lathi charge and so on. And the camp came up, but still they are there. And in Silger also, they protested so strongly against that one camp And as I said, it became a national story. But in Silgir itself, the first camp was close to Silgir, meaning we called it Silgir camp, but it was like 1 kilometer outside Silgir. But they have effectually made another camp within Silgir itself, on a land that people had cleared and where they used to have their meetings. You know, big football field kind of a land, and very, and in the last year or so, we have had powerful, 2 years, powerful meetings there. But despite all that, because of all these camps, because of all this force, the apparatus that they have, I mean, they have AK-47s and they have, so they can, they are the rulers. The gun rules. So therefore, it's a very sort of serious situation in Bastar, because now what do the people do? The Congress government promised a political dialogue. In fact, one of the promises in its manifesto was that they would, because they came in 2018, between 2005 and 2018, already there was a lot of violence and many people had died, and Bastar was in a mess. And the Congress government promised that, we'll have a political dialogue, but they have, instead, they are also going ahead with the security-centric view and, just the establishment of camps and camps and camps. And everything there is for security reasons. So, like recently, the CDRO team was stopped. We were going to investigate, there were 16 people, 16 activists from different human rights organizations, all part of CDRO, and I was helping them locally. And we were 18 persons in all, and we had met with the district administration, not to seek permission or to inform them, but we thought rather than being stopped further in, we'll just chat up with them and go. So they talk very nicely with you and so on, but after that, every camp, of course, it's a routine that in every camp they'll stop you, that we all expect. But then they should also let you go ahead, no? But what we found was, the CDRO team found was, that they made it impossible for us to continue. So between Sukma and this other place called Donnapal, which is just 40 kilometers, we were stopped in 4 camps, and every time detailed checking, Aadhaar cards, this, that. And then in Donnapal, night, it became night time, so therefore, and our drivers was too scared now to continue. So in the sense, they make it impossible for you to continue. And then there was no place for us to stay, because Donnapal is a very small place. There are just 1 or 2 places where you can, we were hoping to get a room or 2, but even there, we went to those places and we were told that we just gave it half an hour ago. In 2 places it happened like that. The PWD place and 1 more place. There are 3 or 4 eating places. There also they said, our food khatam ho gaya. Later we learned that some plainclothes people had said that khana nahi dena hai. And in one shop, even the rice was thrown. Then some tribal leaders, they told us that you are welcome to come to our village, which is just 5 kilometers from here. You can stay in the Gram Panchayat office. So we were very glad, and we headed to that village. After difficulty, we reached there, and we find that the police vehicle is already there, blocking our entry to the village. That you can't be allowed to enter. All for what? For security reasons. And we said, we don't want your security. So no, it's for your safety, madam, or sirs, or whatever. So you see, so they force this security on you, and it's just a way to not allow you to proceed further. But despite that, I'm happy to say that I'm just coming from another fact-finding, which we had in 2 batches. So there was a group of civilians who did 1 batch, 1 round in South Bastar, and then there was another small group, and we went in North Bastar, and we went to protest sites and camps and mining in order to understand the connection between all this. So Bastar is in crisis, no doubt, but all of us, I'm sure, will continue to find ways out and continue to fight.